I never imagined a single whisper could change everything. It was the kind of whisper that freezes your blood, makes your heart stop mid-beat, and leaves you questioning every choice you've ever made. My son, Oliver, was 8 years old. He had big brown eyes, the kind that could melt anyone's heart, or, in that moment, make me believe he had seen something I couldn't yet comprehend. We had just waved goodbye to my husband, James, at the airport, and I thought we were going to return to our normal life, the mundane routines, the homework battles, the bedtime stories. But Oliver's small voice, trembling with fear, sliced through the ordinary like a knife. "Mom, we can't go home. I heard Dad planning something bad for us." Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. I laughed nervously at first, because what mother wouldn't? I mean, James was my husband, the father of my child, the man I trusted with my life. Surely my 8-year-old was imagining things. Children have vivid imaginations, after all. But there was something in the way Oliver's lips quivered, the way he kept glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to appear from the shadows. That wasn't imagination. That was terror. And terror, when it comes from your child, is not something you ignore. We walked through the sliding glass doors of the airport, the sunlight blinding me for a moment. I carried our carry-on bags, while Oliver clutched my hand like a lifeline. In my mind, I tried to rationalize what he'd said. Maybe he overheard James on a work call, or maybe it was a misinterpretation of a conversation I wasn't privy to. I told myself these things. I repeated them like a mantra to calm the growing panic. But deep down, a voice I didn't want to hear whispered, "What if he isn't wrong?" I could feel Oliver's small hand shaking in mine. "I heard him, Mum." "I swear," he said, looking at me with an intensity that made my stomach churn. He said if we weren't careful, we'd regret it." The words made no sense in a conventional way, but the fear behind them was tangible, almost suffocating. It was a fear I hadn't felt in years, maybe never, not even in my worst nightmares. As we drove home. Or rather, as we drove away from our usual route, Oliver's eyes never left the rearview mirror. Every car that passed us, every person who walked down the sidewalk, seemed like a potential threat. And the thing is, when your child's instincts scream danger, you notice things you would normally ignore. I noticed the way the sky looked heavier that day, gray clouds hanging low as if warning me. I noticed the unusual quiet of our neighborhood, the absence of the familiar sounds that usually made me feel safe. It all added up to a sense of wrongness that gnawed at me relentlessly. I thought back to the last few weeks, searching for clues, for signs I might have missed. James had been distant, more distracted than usual. He worked late nights, yes, but now I wondered if it was just a cover. There were phone calls he took in private, hushed conversations that ended the moment I walked into the room. He had a file cabinet that was always locked, and he would jump at the mention of certain topics. Small things, perhaps, insignificant in isolation, but they suddenly felt like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to complete. And then there was Oliver. Kids notice things adults dismiss. He had been unusually quiet, fidgety, asking questions that seemed innocent but hinted at understanding far beyond his years. Why was he asking if people could really get hurt at home? Why did he pause before telling me he'd overheard James talking late at night? It was unsettling, unnerving, terrifying even. As I navigated the streets, trying to think rationally, my mind replayed that whisper over and over. I asked myself, could my husband really be capable of something like this? The man I married, the father of my child, the one I believed I knew inside and out. But the more I tried to convince myself it was impossible, the more I noticed the inconsistencies, the small lies, the secrets, the subtle hints that something was amiss. And I knew, somewhere deep in my gut, that ignoring this feeling would be the gravest mistake of my life. We pulled over to a quiet parking lot and sat in silence. Oliver clutched my arm, his small fingers digging into my skin. I could feel his heart racing against mine. "Mom, what do we do?" His voice was almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of something no child should ever have to bear. I had no answer. I didn't even know where to start. But I knew one thing, we could not go home. Not yet. Not until I understood what James was planning and whether we were in danger. I looked at Oliver, trying to calm him, trying to convince myself, too, that we were safe. But the more I stared into his terrified eyes, the more I realized that safety was an illusion. Every parent wants to believe their home is a sanctuary, that the people they love most would never hurt them. But what if that wasn't true? What if the threat was closer than I imagined? My chest tightened, my hands shook on the steering wheel, and I felt the first real pangs of fear I had known in years. And that's when I noticed it, the shadow in the parking lot. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a trick of my panicked mind. But then the shadow shifted, elongated, and for a brief, horrifying moment, I thought I saw someone watching us. My heart lurched. I wanted to believe it was nothing, that I was imagining things, but Oliver's gasp confirmed my worst fears. He leaned into me, eyes wide. "Mom, he's looking for us." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. What do you do when the person you trusted most might be your greatest threat? How do you protect your child when every familiar place, every routine, every sense of normalcy feels like it could betray you? These questions raced through my mind, unrelenting, as I realized that our lives had shifted in an instant. What started as a normal day, a goodbye at the airport, had morphed into something I couldn't have predicted in 1,000 lifetimes. The problem, of course, is that fear has a way of sharpening your senses. It forces you to notice details you would normally overlook. I noticed the way the leaves rustled against the asphalt, the sound of our tires echoing in the empty lot, the distant hum of a car engine that could belong to anyone or someone dangerous. Every moment stretched, every second felt like a test, and yet I had to act. There was no turning back, not without facing what I might discover if we returned home. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I told Oliver we were going to stay put, for now, find somewhere safe. Somewhere no one could find us. Somewhere I could figure out what James was planning and whether the man I loved was truly a danger. And as I looked at him, curled up against me, I realized that we were stepping into a story with no script, a story where the rules were unknown and the stakes life and death could not be ignored. But we couldn't stay hidden forever. Every minute we waited, every choice we made, felt like walking on a knife's edge. And as we sat in that silent parking lot, fear and uncertainty surrounding us, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something I would never forget. Something that would shatter the fragile illusion of safety we had clung to all our lives. I didn't realize the full weight of Oliver's words until we were several blocks away from our neighborhood. "We can't go home," he had said. At first, I wanted to dismiss it as a child's imagination, but the tremor in his voice, the way his small hand gripped mine, told me otherwise. There was something urgent in his tone, something that made me sit a little straighter, drive a little slower, and pay attention in a way I hadn't in years. "Oliver," I said gently, trying to sound calm, "what exactly did you hear?" He hesitated, his little brow furrowing. He was talking to someone. About us. About what he'd do if we didn't listen. "Mom," I heard him say we'd regret it. His words landed on me like icy water. Regret what? What could James possibly have meant? My stomach knotted. I wanted to believe that Oliver had misheard, that he had confused a harmless conversation for something sinister. But the fear in his eyes, fear so pure and raw that it felt like it could burn through my own chest, made me doubt that explanation. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The street looked ordinary. The houses stood in neat rows, the lawns trimmed and sunlit. Nothing here suggested danger, nothing screamed alarm. And yet, I felt a chill crawling up my spine. How could something so ordinary feel so wrong? Did he mean harm? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Oliver shook his head quickly, but not before his lips trembled. "I don't know," he said. "But Mom, I know it's bad." That's when the rational part of me, the part that had always solved problems, that had always stayed calm, started arguing with the fear. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe it was just a child's misunderstanding. Maybe James had been frustrated or stressed about work, and Oliver had twisted words into something darker than intended. Maybe. But the other part of me, the gut, the instinct, The maternal radar I'd always thought of as nonsense screamed at me not to ignore it. That voice is hard to explain. It's sharper than worry, faster than fear, and heavier than doubt. It whispers, quietly but insistently, when something is about to go wrong. And I had that whisper now, echoing in every beat of my chest. Something is about to go very, very wrong. We didn't go home that day. I took us to a quiet parking lot I remembered from errands, a place with tall hedges, a thick tree line, and very few passers-by. I parked and let the car idle while I tried to think. Oliver leaned against the seat, shoulders shaking, eyes wide. His small fingers gripped my arm. "Mom, what if he comes?" he whispered. I didn't answer right away. How do you comfort an 8-year-old when the person you love most may be the threat? My mind raced. Should we call someone? Should we leave the city entirely? What if we were overreacting and I terrified him for nothing? But then, just for a second, I saw the tiny lines of worry etched on Oliver's face. And I realized there was no overreacting when your child's intuition screamed danger. I started thinking back. Was this really out of nowhere? Had I ignored warning signs? James had been acting differently for weeks. The late nights were one thing. But then there were the small behaviors I couldn't quite place. He'd be on his phone in another room, voice low, tone sharp. He'd snap at little things, nothing I would have noticed in isolation. But now, looking back, they felt like red flags, subtle signals of something brewing. And Oliver had noticed too. Kids see more than we give them credit for. He notices tone, facial expressions, micro-reactions. He notices when someone closes a door too quickly, when someone's footsteps echo differently, when the silence in a room feels heavier than usual. He's little, but he has a radar that sometimes sees things adults ignore. I glanced at him in the passenger seat. "Oliver, tell me exactly what you heard." "Every word," I said. He swallowed, then whispered, he said. "They won't listen. They'll regret it. Make sure they're ready." That's all I remember. But it was scary, Mom. Scary didn't even begin to cover it. The words replayed in my mind, over and over. Who was James talking to? What did he mean by make sure they're ready? My pulse quickened, my hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. I felt trapped in a nightmare that had started in the bright sunlight of an ordinary airport terminal. We sat in silence for a few moments, each of us wrapped in our own fear. And then I made the first decision that would define the next hours of our lives. We couldn't go home, not yet. Not until I knew what James was planning. Not until I had a plan to protect Oliver. I considered calling anyone. A friend, a neighbor, maybe even the police. But every scenario in my mind ended with me regretting the choice. What if it alerted him that we suspected something? What if it escalated things? There was no manual for this. There was only instinct, fear, and the desperate need to keep my child safe. I turned the key in the ignition and drove us to a quiet motel a few miles away. Somewhere off the main roads, somewhere we could disappear if we needed to. Oliver sat silently, hugging his backpack like a shield. His wide eyes darted to every movement outside the window. Every passing car, every shadow cast by a street lamp, made him flinch. And every flinch reminded me that our lives had shifted irreversibly. We checked into a room that smelled faintly of mildew and old carpet. It was far from home, far from safety, but it was a place to think, to breathe, to plan our next steps. I locked the door, drew the curtains, and finally sat down beside Oliver on the bed. He curled into me, and I could feel the tremors running through his small body. "Mom," he said softly, "do you think he'll come for us?" I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell him no, that everything would be fine, that he had nothing to fear. But the truth was I didn't know. And telling him the truth about the whispers, about James's strange behavior, about the gnawing suspicion that he might be dangerous, felt like dropping a stone into a well that I couldn't pull back. So I held him tighter, whispered that we'd figure it out, that we were safe for now. But deep down, I knew the next steps wouldn't be simple. Fear was no longer a distant threat. It was here, tangible, creeping into every thought, every movement, every heartbeat. And then I heard the noise. At first, I thought it was the air conditioning. Then the rustling of the curtains made me freeze. Every instinct screamed at me. We weren't alone. I held Oliver tighter, heart hammering in my chest. My mind raced. Could James have followed us? Was it someone else? How did they find us? Every scenario was worse than the last, and yet there was one undeniable truth. The threat was real, and we were on borrowed time. I crept to the window, heart in my throat, and peeked through the curtains. Nothing. Just the parking lot, empty and silent under the dim glow of a street lamp. But the sense of being watched didn't leave. I could feel it pressing down, heavy, almost suffocating. Oliver whimpered beside me, and I knew one thing for certain. We had crossed the point of no return. We couldn't go home. Saying it out loud felt surreal, even absurd. My husband, my James, was out there somewhere, plotting something we couldn't yet fully understand. And now, my 8-year-old son and I were fugitives in our own city, hiding from the man who was supposed to protect us. I pulled the car onto a side road that curved sharply between 2 rows of trees. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly I thought my knuckles might crack. Oliver's small head rested on my shoulder, his breath coming fast and uneven. I could feel his fear radiating through him like static electricity. "We need somewhere safe," I whispered, mostly to myself. "Somewhere no one can find us." Oliver nodded, eyes wide, glancing at every passing shadow. "Do you think he'll know where we went?" I didn't answer. How could I? I didn't know. The thought that James might be tracking us, that he might have anticipated some of my moves, twisted my stomach into knots. Every instinct screamed that we needed a place off the map, a place where we could breathe, think, and maybe even plan a next step. The motel we chose was far from glamorous. Its sign flickered in the dim evening light, a buzzing neon vacancy that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The carpet smelled faintly of damp. The walls had that sterile, recycled smoke scent that I remembered from other motels I'd stayed in. But it was isolated, off the main road, and for now, that was enough. Inside the room, I locked every latch I could find. I drew the curtains tight, checked the windows, even blocked the door slightly with a chair. Oliver curled into me on the bed, small and trembling. "Mum," he whispered, "do you think he'll come for us tonight?" I swallowed hard. I wanted to say no. I wanted to promise him safety, warmth, and a sense that everything would be okay. But the truth was heavier than any reassurance I could offer. I didn't know what James was capable of. I didn't know what he had planned. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't even know the full extent of his secrecy. So I hugged him tighter. "We're safe for now," I whispered. "I won't let anything happen to you. Not while I'm here." And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. For the first time in years, I felt completely alone. Not alone in the physical sense, Oliver was with me, but emotionally, mentally, I was on my own. The man I trusted most had become a potential threat. Every memory of love, of laughter, every moment of supposed normalcy suddenly felt tainted. Every argument, every secret, every late-night call he had kept hidden, it all felt like it had been building toward this moment. I tried to push those thoughts aside and focus on practicalities. Food, water, communication. I took a small notebook from my bag and started jotting down details, trying to make sense of the chaos. Phone calls. Potential safe places. Neighbors who might be loyal or spies. Every detail mattered. Every choice could be the difference between staying safe and being caught. Oliver peeked over my shoulder as I wrote. "Are we going to stay here forever?" he asked. I smiled weakly, forcing calm into my voice. "No, honey. Just until we figure out what's going on. We'll move again soon, somewhere even safer." He didn't look reassured. I knew he wasn't. He was too young to understand the full scope of danger, too young to see the intricate ways adults manipulate and hide their secrets. But he sensed it. Kids sense these things. Their fear is often sharper than any adult's because they don't have the filters we build over time. They feel truth in / I folded the note, keeping it close. "It's nothing for now," I said, trying to mask the fear in my voice. But I knew it wasn't nothing. It was a message. A signal. And signals from James never came without intent. We didn't sleep that night. Not really. We stayed in shifts, Oliver curled against me one moment, and me standing at the window peering into the shadows the next. Every time I heard a car engine in the distance, every time the wind rattled the window, I froze. My mind replayed his words over and over. They won't listen. They'll regret it. I didn't understand them yet, but I would. And as dawn crept in through the thin curtains, illuminating the room in a gray, cold light, I realized we had no time to waste. Staying hidden was only part of the plan. We had to figure out what he was planning. We had to anticipate his moves, his intentions, his next step. And I had to prepare, mentally and physically, for a confrontation that I didn't know if we could survive. I could see the worry etched into Oliver's small face. I wanted to tell him it would all be okay. I wanted to believe it myself. But something in my gut screamed that the danger was closer than I had imagined, and that it wasn't just physical, it was psychological. James was playing a game, and we were the pieces. And pieces, I knew, could be moved, broken, or discarded at his whim. I made a vow silently to myself. I would not let him hurt Oliver. I would not let him control us. And whatever it took, I would uncover what he was planning, and I would stop it. And then I heard it, a knock on the door. It was soft at first, tentative. Just enough to make my blood run cold. My heart thumped in my chest, my mind racing through possibilities. Who could it be? The motel neighbor? A cleaning staff member? Or him? I held Oliver close, whispering for him to stay quiet. My body tensed, every muscle ready to act. Every instinct screamed that danger had arrived. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Hiding was no longer enough. We stayed frozen in the motel room, the knock lingering in my mind long after it had stopped. Every second stretched into an eternity. I could feel Oliver trembling against me, tiny arms wrapped around my waist, eyes wide with fear. He didn't speak. Neither did I. Silence was our only shield, a fragile barrier between us and whatever waited outside. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I finally dared to breathe. Carefully, I moved to the door and peeked through the peephole. Nothing. Empty hallway. The flickering light overhead cast shadows that danced across the peeling wallpaper. I exhaled slowly, convincing myself it was a neighbor or a passing guest, nothing more. But deep down, I knew better. James was a meticulous man. He planned, calculated, anticipated. This wasn't a coincidence. The note under the door, the whispers Oliver had heard, it all pointed to one terrifying truth. James had been hiding things from me. Not small things. Not trivial secrets. Big, dangerous things. And now I was beginning to uncover them. I turned back to Oliver. "Stay here," I whispered. "I'm going to check something." He shook his head. "Don't go, Mom. Please." I ignored the protest. I had to know. I had to understand what we were up against. I grabbed my bag and pulled out the laptop, my hands shaking. My mind raced as I opened emails, files, and documents I had access to. Nothing at first. Just spreadsheets, work emails, and old receipts. But then I found it, a folder labeled private that I had never seen before. My pulse quickened. I clicked it open. Inside were documents I couldn't believe. Financial statements showing large, unexplained withdrawals. Names of people I didn't recognize, contacts James had never mentioned. And then, something that made my stomach turn, detailed notes on our routines, schedules, even observations about Oliver. Every detail meticulously recorded, as if he had been planning something for weeks, maybe months. I sank into the chair, heart hammering. My mind screamed. What was this? Why had he kept this from me? Could it be? The thought made me sick to my core. Oliver's voice broke through my thoughts. "Mom, what is it?" I closed the laptop, trying to compose myself. "Nothing for now, honey," I said, though the words sounded hollow even to me. How could I explain to him that his father, our father, might be dangerous? That the man he loved, the man he trusted, could have plans that threatened our very lives? I didn't know how to put it into words, not yet. I paced the room, trying to think. Every scenario in my mind ended in fear. I imagined James discovering we were gone, tracking us down, cornering us in this room. I imagined him using his meticulous planning against us. Every small detail I had seen in the folder made sense in a horrifying way. He knew our routines. He knew our vulnerabilities. He was prepared. I had to act fast. I had to figure out his intentions before he acted. I had to protect Oliver, but also myself. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized the horrifying possibility. James wasn't just angry. He wasn't just controlling. He was deliberate, cold, calculating. And we were caught in the middle of something far bigger than a family dispute. I tried to recall any recent incidents, any hints I might have missed. The late-night calls, the hidden receipts, the secret files. All of it now made sense in a terrifying pattern. I remembered Oliver's observation the night before, his insistence that something was wrong. Children sense things adults dismiss. And Oliver hadn't just imagined it. He had seen the pattern, felt the tension, and had tried to warn me. Suddenly, a thought struck me. If James had been planning this, how much longer until he made his move? How many steps ahead was he, and how many mistakes had I made that could have led him right to us? Panic rose, squeezing my chest. We weren't just hiding. We were running out of time. I gathered the documents from the folder, stuffing them into my bag. I had to analyze them, figure out the plan, understand what James had intended. There was no turning back now. Each detail mattered. Every observation, every note, every financial transaction could be a clue, a key to survival. Oliver watched me, still curled against the bed. "Mom, what's happening?" he asked, his voice trembling. I knelt beside him, holding his small hands in mine. "We're going to figure it out, Ollie. I promise. But we have to be very careful. Very, very careful." He nodded, but the fear in his eyes hadn't faded. And I couldn't blame him. I felt the same terror, the same gnawing dread that our lives had changed irrevocably. Hours passed in a blur of whispered conversations, frantic notes, and careful observation. Every sound outside the room made me jump, the creak of a floorboard, the distant bark of a dog, the hum of a passing car. I imagined James moving through the city, orchestrating his plan with precision, unaware that his wife and son were one step ahead for now. And then came the subtle, terrifying detail that made my blood run cold. I noticed something in the documents, a recurring symbol, a series of letters and numbers that seemed to correspond with locations. Motels, restaurants, even our old home. It wasn't random. He had been marking potential spots, mapping movements, planning contingencies. He had been preparing for this moment, long before we suspected. I sat back, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of it. This wasn't just a domestic dispute. This wasn't a quarrel. This was premeditated. And the realization hit me harder than anything else. The man I loved, the man I trusted with our lives, had been planning against us all along. I looked at Oliver, asleep against the pillow, his small chest rising and falling in rhythm with the slow, uneven beat of his fear. And I knew in that moment that I couldn't let James succeed. Whatever he had planned, whatever danger he intended, we had to survive. And survival meant staying ahead, staying sharp, and staying invisible. The documents in my bag felt heavier than they were. Every line, every note was a piece of a puzzle I didn't yet fully understand. But one thing was clear: James was deliberate, organized, and ruthless. And we had only begun to see the scope of what we were facing. I leaned back, exhausted, trying to process it all. And then I heard it, a faint sound, almost imperceptible at first. A tapping, deliberate, slow. From outside the room. My stomach twisted. Someone was there. I froze, heart hammering. Not a guest, not a passerby. This was deliberate. Someone was checking on us. I pulled Oliver close, whispering for him to stay quiet, my mind racing. Every instinct screamed that we had been discovered. And then, through the thin walls of the motel, I heard it clearly, a low voice calling a name. Oliver's name. My blood ran cold. The voice calling Oliver's name was low, deliberate, and unmistakable. My stomach twisted into knots as I froze in place, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it could burst through my chest. I could hear it again, faint but chilling, coming from somewhere outside the thin walls of our motel room. Oliver. The voice murmured, dragging the syllables, testing us, taunting us. My first instinct was to hide, to shield my son with my own body, to make us as small and invisible as possible. But that was a fleeting thought. Deep down, I knew hiding was no longer enough. If James, or whoever was outside, was willing to track us here, we had to act. I had to think. I had to plan. Oliver, I whispered, keeping my voice low, stay under the bed. Don't make a sound. Promise me. He nodded quickly, crawling under the small bed with trembling hands. His eyes, wide in the dim light, met mine for a brief second before he disappeared from view. Mom, be careful, he whispered. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing, trying to convince myself I wasn't terrified. But every instinct screamed that we were running out of time. Whoever was outside knew exactly where we were. And that meant our little refuge, the motel, the curtains, even our precautions, wasn't enough. I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds, heart pounding. At first, I saw nothing but the empty parking lot, lit dimly by the flickering streetlight. But then I noticed it, a shadow, elongated and shifting, moving near the trees that bordered the lot. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting. Someone knew we were here. My mind raced. Could it be a neighbor? A passerby? No. The way the shadow moved, deliberate, calculated, told me it was him. James. And the thought made bile rise in my throat. I backed away from the window, pacing the room, my brain frantically working through every possible scenario. Should we flee immediately? Should we try to call the police? Could I even trust anyone to help us? Every option seemed dangerous, risky, and potentially fatal. Then my eyes fell on the documents I had gathered from the laptop the night before. James had been meticulous in his planning. Everything, every note, every observation about our routines, every pattern of our movements was recorded and analyzed. And now, staring at those papers, I realized the terrifying truth. He was always one step ahead. But that didn't mean we couldn't fight back. It meant we had to be smarter, faster, more careful. I gathered the documents and stuffed them into my bag, my hands trembling. I couldn't let them fall into his hands. Not now, not ever. Suddenly, the motel room door rattled. Not a knock this time, not a soft sound. A deliberate, forceful rattle, as if testing the locks, testing our resolve. My blood ran cold. Someone was trying to get in. I grabbed Oliver from under the bed, holding him close, whispering that it was going to be okay. But I didn't believe it. Every nerve in my body screamed that we were on the edge of something catastrophic. I grabbed my bag, shoved it under my arm, and scanned the room for escape routes. The window. The fire exit. The tiny hallway outside. Nothing felt safe. Nothing felt secure. And then I remembered the car. We hadn't moved it since arriving. It was still parked just outside, our one real lifeline to safety. If we could make it there without being seen, maybe, just maybe, we could put some distance between us and James. I crept toward the door, listening. The rattling had stopped. Silence. But silence in these moments is never comforting. It's a warning. A pause before the storm. I whispered to Oliver, we're going to the car. Quietly. Slowly. Stay behind me. Don't look back. He nodded, clinging to me, eyes wide with fear. I led him to the door, my hand on the doorknob, ready to swing it open at a moment's notice. I counted in my head, 3, 2, 1. I opened it. Nothing. Empty hallway. But then, just as relief washed over me, a shadow darted across the far end of the corridor. My stomach dropped. Someone had been inside the motel, inside the building, and now they were gone, or perhaps waiting somewhere else. My mind raced. How many accomplices did he have? How much had he anticipated? We crept down the hallway, pressed against the wall, moving as quietly as possible. Every step felt loud, every breath dangerous. My heart pounded in my chest, echoing through my skull. And then I reached the exit door. I opened it slowly, peeking out. The parking lot was empty. My car sat there, the keys still in the ignition, as if inviting us to run. But then I saw movement at the edge of the lot, a figure, just at the tree line. Watching. Waiting. Calculating. It was him. I froze. My mind screamed for action, for a plan, for anything. But what could I do? I had my son in my arms, my bag clutched tightly, and a man who had once been my husband, who knew our routines, our habits, our fears, waiting just beyond the safety of the motel lights. I whispered to Oliver, "Hold on. Don't let go of me, no matter what happens." He nodded, clutching my jacket as if it were a lifeline. My pulse raced, my thoughts spun. Every instinct told me we needed to flee. Every detail of the documents, every observation from the night before, screamed that this moment, this confrontation, was imminent. And then he moved. Slowly, deliberately, stepping out from the shadows. My stomach twisted. Every step he took was calculated, measured, controlled. He wasn't just looking for us. He was orchestrating something bigger, something I couldn't yet see. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "We're not going to let him win. Not today." And just as I was about to make a move, he paused, turned slightly, and spoke. His voice was calm, almost casual, but laced with an edge that made my blood run cold. "I know you're out there," he said. "I've been waiting for you." And that's when I realized something terrifying. We weren't just hiding. We were running into the exact trap he had set for us. The words James spoke echoed in my ears, cold and deliberate. "I know you're out there. I've been waiting for you." My blood ran ice cold, and my mind raced faster than it ever had in my life. We weren't just being pursued. We were in the middle of a game he had planned long before we even suspected it. And the worst part? We were on his terms. I pressed Oliver closer against me, feeling the rapid rise and fall of his small chest. He whimpered softly. What do we do?" I swallowed hard. I didn't have a clear answer. Every plan I had tried to form in the motel room seemed meaningless now. Every step we had taken was already anticipated. The documents, the notes, the secret observations, all of it pointed to one terrifying truth. James had been preparing for this for weeks, maybe months. Every escape route, every hideout, every minor decision we thought was clever, he had thought of it first. I took a deep breath and whispered, "We move. We run now." Quietly. No mistakes. Oliver nodded, his grip tightening on my jacket. His small hand felt like a lifeline I couldn't let go of. I had to protect him, not just from the physical danger, but from the psychological terror that James was trying to impose. We moved quickly to the car, hugging the shadows along the edge of the lot. Every creak of the motel, every distant car passing on the highway, felt amplified, as if the world itself were conspiring against us. My pulse raced, my thoughts darting from one worst-case scenario to another. When we reached the car, relief washed over me for just a moment. It was still there, keys in the ignition, ready to take us away from this nightmare. But as I slid into the driver's seat, I realized relief was premature. From the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow near the tree line again. James was out there, silent, waiting, studying us like a predator tracking prey. I slammed the car door quietly, holding Oliver close on the passenger side. My hands shook on the wheel as I started the engine. Every instinct screamed to drive straight into the night, to disappear into the darkness, but I knew that would be too predictable. He expected us to flee blindly. We had to be smarter. I turned to Oliver. "Listen carefully. We're going to a place he won't think to look. Somewhere far from here, somewhere safe for now." He nodded, eyes wide, filled with fear, but also trust, the kind of trust only a child gives to a parent when they know no one else can protect them. The drive was tense, every mile stretching into an eternity. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see James's car following us, half expecting to see a stranger emerge from the shadows. Every small sound. The hum of the engine, the tires on the asphalt, a passing car horn, felt amplified, each one a potential signal of danger. And then it happened. A car, black, appearing seemingly out of nowhere, flanked us on the highway. My stomach dropped. Could he have followed us already? How had he anticipated our route? The vehicle stayed parallel for a few seconds, windows dark motionless, like a shark circling its prey. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it turned off the highway. My relief was shallow and fleeting. He was close. Too close. We drove in silence after that, the tension in the car thick and suffocating. Oliver whispered questions, innocent, curious, terrified. "Mom, why is Dad doing this? Did we do something wrong?" I couldn't answer. I didn't know why. Nothing we had done could explain this. Nothing justified the meticulous preparation, the secret files, the relentless pursuit. And the hardest part was realizing that James's actions weren't about punishment, they were about control. Absolute, calculated, terrifying control. We finally reached a secluded location I had scouted on a previous trip, a tiny cabin hidden in a wooded area outside the city. It was isolated, off the grid, and perfect for temporary refuge. But as I approached, heart racing, I realized something horrifying. James had probably anticipated this, too. He had anticipated that we might have a contingency plan, a backup location. I parked the car behind dense trees, shielding us from view. Oliver climbed out silently, following me closely. I led him through a narrow path to the cabin, my mind racing for contingencies, escape routes, and traps. Every step we took was deliberate, cautious. Every shadow, every rustle in the leaves, every distant sound felt like a threat. Inside the cabin, I locked the door, drew the curtains, and began inspecting the space. It was empty, untouched, seemingly safe. But nothing felt truly safe anymore. My mind raced with possibilities, hidden cameras, listening devices, perhaps even someone waiting in the woods. Every instinct screamed vigilance. Oliver curled up against me on the worn couch, silent and tense. I could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on me, suffocating, demanding absolute attention. I had to be alert, think clearly, and stay ahead of James at every turn. One mistake, one lapse in judgment, could cost us everything. Hours passed. The tension didn't ease. Every creak of the cabin, every distant howl of an animal, every whisper of the wind felt magnified, as if signaling danger. I reviewed the documents again, trying to decipher patterns, clues, anything that could give me leverage. The more I studied, the more I realized James had prepared for every contingency, except perhaps the one thing he hadn't anticipated, my determination to protect Oliver, no matter the cost. But even as I tried to focus on strategy, a gnawing fear persisted. Time was slipping away. Every hour, every minute, increased the likelihood that James would find us, confront us, or escalate his plans. We weren't just racing against him, we were racing against time itself, against a man who had meticulously plotted every possible scenario. I glanced at Oliver, asleep finally, small and vulnerable against the couch. My heart ached. He didn't deserve this. No child does. And yet, I knew that survival meant more than comfort. It meant preparation, vigilance, and courage in the face of a threat we had no idea how far it would go. Suddenly, a sound shattered the fragile quiet, a faint tapping on the cabin window, deliberate and slow. My heart stopped. I froze, my mind racing through possibilities. How had he found us? How did he know this location? My pulse thundered in my ears. I whispered urgently to Oliver, shaking him awake. "Get down. Hide." He obeyed immediately, crawling under the couch, trembling. I moved to the window, peering through the shadows. Nothing. Empty woods. But the tapping continued, rhythmic, deliberate. It wasn't random. It was a signal. A message. And then I saw it, just a glimpse, a dark figure moving through the trees, methodical, precise, watching, waiting. My breath caught. We weren't just racing against time. We were being hunted. The woods around the cabin were unnaturally quiet now. The wind had died down, leaving only the occasional rustle of leaves, which sounded deafening in the silence. Every nerve in my body screamed danger. I had tried to reassure myself that James was just testing us, playing a psychological game to intimidate us, but deep down, I knew he was already calculating his next move. And soon, he would strike. I crouched beside Oliver, who was still hiding under the couch, eyes wide and trembling. "We need to stay calm," I whispered, though my own voice shook. "I won't let him hurt us. I promise." He looked up at me, small tears glistening in his eyes. Mom, why is Dad doing this? I hesitated. The truth was unbearable. James wasn't angry. He wasn't simply controlling. He was deliberate, cold, and methodical. Every step, every document, every plan he had laid out was part of a strategy one was only beginning to understand. I don't know, Ollie, I admitted softly. But we'll figure it out. We have to. I peeked through the curtains again. Shadows flickered between the trees, impossible to track clearly in the darkness. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and aware that he could be anywhere. And the thought made my chest tighten, the same chest that had been running nonstop for hours, trapped in a cage of fear and adrenaline. I had a moment of clarity then. James wasn't just planning to scare us. He wanted control. He wanted fear to rule our lives, to make us react, to make us predictably trapped. That meant every decision I made had to be deliberate, calculated, and unpredictable. We couldn't just hide. We had to strategize, anticipate, and stay one step ahead. I turned to Oliver. Listen, we can't stay here forever. We'll need to move again. Soon. We have to be ready. He nodded, silent now, as if absorbing the weight of the plan. I felt a surge of both fear and determination. My son's life, our survival, depended entirely on my choices in these next hours. I grabbed the bag with the documents, reviewing the pages I had analyzed earlier. Patterns emerged, tiny inconsistencies, clues that hinted at his broader plan. James had marked locations, routines, even minor behavioral patterns in his notes. It was overwhelming, terrifying, but also a lifeline. Understanding his planning gave me a slight edge, the knowledge that he relied on predictability. If we could be unpredictable, if we could break the patterns he expected, we might survive this. I felt the cabin shift slightly, almost imperceptibly. My heart leapt. My eyes darted to the window. A shadow moved again. Not random. Deliberate. Watching. Waiting. I knew we couldn't wait any longer. I had to confront what was coming, even if only to stay one step ahead. I whispered to Oliver, we have to be ready. If he comes, we stay calm, we stay quiet, and we move exactly as we planned. He nodded silently, his small fingers gripping mine tightly. I could feel his fear, but also his trust, a trust one couldn't betray. Hours passed, and I sat in tense vigilance, listening for any sound, any shift in the woods outside. Every creak of the cabin, every distant animal call, every whisper of wind felt magnified. I realized that James was patient. He had time on his side. He could wait until we made a mistake, until we let our guard down. And I knew that patience made him dangerous beyond measure. I moved to the door and checked the locks again. Secure. But it didn't matter. He could be outside. He could have accomplices. He could know our escape routes. He had prepared for every contingency. I had to prepare for what he hadn't anticipated, my refusal to be predictable. As I plotted our next move, a faint sound reached my ears, a car engine, distant but deliberate, moving through the woods. My heart leapt. He was close. Too close. Every instinct screamed that we had been spotted, that our temporary refuge was compromised. I whispered to Oliver, hide. Now. Stay under the couch and don't make a sound. He obeyed immediately. I moved to the window and peered through the darkness. The engine's hum grew louder, then stopped. Silence. My pulse raced, adrenaline surging through every vein. And then I saw him. James stepped out of the shadows, calm, deliberate, eyes scanning the area. He was carrying something. Small, compact, but unmistakably purposeful. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't panicking. He was confident, composed, a predator observing prey. I froze. I could feel my body locking up with a mix of terror and calculation. This was the moment I had feared and anticipated. The confrontation I had been bracing for had arrived. I thought about our options. Fight? Run? Hide? Every path seemed fraught with risk, and yet we had no choice. Staying passive was no longer an option. Every second wasted increased our vulnerability. I whispered to myself, barely audible, we survive. We survive. No matter what. I could hear Oliver breathing under the couch, steady but shallow. I needed him to stay quiet, to stay calm. And I needed myself to think, to act, to anticipate James's next move. He moved closer to the cabin, deliberate steps on the soft dirt, eyes scanning every shadow, every line of light through the trees. It was almost hypnotic, terrifying in its precision. He wasn't just coming to intimidate us. He had a plan, a method. And then I heard him mutter, softly, almost under his breath, "They think they can hide, but they're mine. Always mine." My blood ran cold. This wasn't anger. This wasn't a tantrum. This was ownership, possession, control. And it was exactly what I feared most. I realized then that surviving this wasn't just about avoiding harm. It was about outthinking him, predicting his moves, staying ahead of the man who had once been my partner and now might be my worst threat. I whispered to Oliver, "We have to be ready. He's coming closer." And just as the words left my mouth, I heard the snap of a branch behind the cabin. My head whipped around. Something or someone was there. Watching. Waiting. Ready. I held Oliver close, heart pounding, adrenaline flooding every nerve. Every instinct screamed that the moment of confrontation had arrived. Every plan, every calculation, every shred of courage would be tested in the next few minutes. And then I realized we were not just hiding anymore. We were on the edge of facing the full extent of James's plan. And I had no idea what awaited us. The woods outside the cabin were silent now. Too silent. My heart thumped so loudly I was sure James could hear it, could track it like a predator tracking prey. Every instinct screamed that the moment of truth had arrived, the moment we had feared, prepared for, and prayed wouldn't come. I crouched behind the couch, Oliver pressed against me, small and trembling. "Mum, is he going to hurt us?" he whispered. I swallowed hard. I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell him we were safe, that everything would be okay. But the truth was darker, heavier, more dangerous than any lie could mask. "We're going to get through this," I whispered. "We just have to stay quiet, stay smart, and stay together. Do you understand?" He nodded, eyes wide, silent tears streaking his cheeks. I peeked through the thin crack of the curtain and my breath caught. There he was, James. Calm, methodical, calculating. He had approached closer than I expected, his eyes scanning the area like a hawk, every movement deliberate, precise. And then I saw it, a folder in his hand. The same kind of folder I had found on his laptop, the same type of notes he had been keeping for weeks, now in physical form. My stomach dropped. He had anticipated that we might find his digital trail, and now he was reinforcing it, reminding me just how far his planning went. He wasn't just a threat, he was organized, meticulous, and frighteningly prepared. I considered my options. Fight? Run? Call for help? Every choice carried massive risk. Every step could be fatal. And the thing I realized in that moment, James wasn't just hunting us. He was testing us. Seeing how far we would go, how clever we could be, whether we could outthink him. Then something caught my eye, a shadow, smaller than James, moving behind the trees. My pulse spiked. It wasn't just him. Someone else was there. Someone who had been waiting, watching. And the realization hit me like a punch. We weren't alone in this. Someone, or something, was manipulating events from the shadows, someone James hadn't considered. I clutched Oliver tighter, whispering, "Stay calm. Don't make a sound." The folder James held dropped to the ground with a soft thud. His eyes narrowed, scanning the perimeter. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, but sharp as a knife, he said something I wasn't expecting. "I knew you'd come here. You always underestimate me." My blood ran cold. He wasn't just taunting. He was confident. In control. He believed he had already won. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to think. He relied on patterns, on predictability. Every step he had taken assumed we would act out of fear, act impulsively. But now I realized something crucial, the unpredictability of my choices, my ability to remain calm under terror, could be his undoing. I whispered to Oliver, "We're going to move now. Follow my lead." Step by step, we crept toward the back exit of the cabin. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig made my chest tighten. My mind raced through contingencies, planning for every possible reaction from James. And then I saw it, a small gap in the trees, barely noticeable, that led to a narrow path away from the cabin. Our chance to escape. I guided Oliver silently, pressing him close to my side. Every movement was deliberate, careful, precise. We were small, slow, invisible, shadows themselves moving through the dark. But then James's voice cut through the night, sharp and cutting. "Don't move. Stop." My blood froze. He had seen us. He had anticipated the possibility of flight. And in that moment, I realized the cruel brilliance of his plan. He had been counting on us trying to escape, and now he was ready to corner us. I hesitated for a heartbeat, calculating. If we continued, he might chase, and the narrow path would be our only chance. If we froze, we were trapped. I whispered, "Now, Ollie, run." We bolted through the path, branches whipping against our arms and faces, the undergrowth clawing at us, as if the forest itself was trying to slow us down. Behind us, James's footsteps pounded against the earth, deliberate, fast, terrifyingly precise. I glanced back. He wasn't chasing blindly. He was controlling the chase, hurting us exactly where he wanted. And then I realized the twist, the one thing he hadn't accounted for. Earlier, when analyzing his notes, I noticed a pattern. Every observation, every plan, every expectation was based on assumptions about us staying together and predictable. But I had created a diversion. I had left subtle signs of our presence in one part of the cabin while leading Oliver another way. He thought he had tracked us precisely, but in reality, he was following a shadow, a trail I had left intentionally. I forced myself to focus, to stay silent, and to keep moving. We reached a clearing in the woods where an old, abandoned shed stood. I pushed the door open quietly, ushering Oliver inside. The shadows swallowed us. We were hidden, almost invisible, and for a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. But the danger wasn't over. James had not been fooled for long. I could hear him at the edge of the clearing, muttering, scanning, methodical. And then the final twist hit me like a thunderclap. In the folder I had taken from the laptop, one document hinted at a partner, a collaborator, someone helping James orchestrate everything. Someone he trusted more than he should. That meant the threat wasn't just James. There was someone else out there, working with him, manipulating events, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I held Oliver close, whispering, "We're not safe yet. But we're closer than he thinks. We have one chance, and we have to take it." And as we pressed into the darkness of the shed, listening to James's frustrated movements outside, I realized the horrifying truth. Surviving this wouldn't just take courage. It would take outthinking a man who thought he controlled everything and staying ahead of the unseen hand he had trusted more than anyone. And in that moment, I knew the final confrontation was inevitable. The twist I hadn't seen coming would change everything. The shed was dark, cramped, and suffocating, but for the first time since leaving the motel, it felt like a temporary sanctuary. Oliver clung to me, small hands trembling against my chest. His wide eyes reflected the dim moonlight streaming through the cracks in the wooden walls. We were hidden, but hiding was no longer enough. We needed a plan, clarity, and courage, even as the threat loomed larger than ever. I whispered to him, "Ollie, you're brave, and you've been brave all along. I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" He nodded silently, and I realized in that moment that survival wasn't just about escaping physical danger. It was about fortifying the mind, controlling fear, and using every ounce of wits and instinct at our disposal. Outside, James's voice echoed through the trees. "They think they can outsmart me, but they won't. Not tonight." The weight of those words hit me hard. He wasn't just a man chasing us. He was a strategist, a predator, a husband who had once sworn to love us, now turned calculating hunter. Every decision he made, every movement, every plan had been intended to corner us, to make us predictable, to strip away our options. And yet, the documents I had uncovered, the patterns I had studied, and the subtle diversions I had created gave us an edge he hadn't anticipated. I crouched beside Oliver, reviewing our options silently. The woods were dense, the shadows deep, and every sound carried ominous weight. But I had discovered something critical from James's own meticulous notes. The collaborator, the hidden ally who had been aiding him, wasn't aware of our last-minute diversions. That meant our timing, our unpredictability, and our knowledge of his assumptions gave us a chance. Not a guarantee, but a chance. I whispered, "We need to move, Ollie." Quietly. "Follow me, exactly as I say, and we might just get through this." He clutched my hand tighter, small fingers trembling, but determined. We stepped into the shadows, carefully navigating the undergrowth, avoiding the areas James had likely monitored. The cool night air filled my lungs, but every step carried the weight of tension and fear. One misstep could alert him, and one wrong move could end everything. As we neared the edge of the clearing, the first shocking revelation of the night struck. The collaborator, someone I had never suspected, emerged from behind a tree. It wasn't a stranger. It was James's business partner, someone